Good evening and welcome to the October 30th, 2024 Lower Makefield Township Planning Commission meeting. First item on our agenda is to call the meeting to order. All members are present except Colin Coyle, who I understand is going to be joining us remotely shortly. Also want to say hello to the township engineer. I don't think you've been in our meeting before.
Thank you. I'm Pat Foley. I work with Isaac Kessler with Remington and Vernick.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. So first item on our agenda is approval of the minutes from October 7th, 2024. Someone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
And there's a second, right? Okay. Any comments about the minutes? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And the minutes are approved. Next item on our agenda is the 697 canine conditional use at 748 Stony Hill Road. And we have the applicant in front of us tonight.
Good evening. My name is Ron Rusk. I'm a partner in the partnership that owns the property, MRG Stony Hill. We've owned the KinderCare property now for over, I guess almost 12 years now. I apologize, my computer did not like hooking up to everything here. And it's acting, I'm on my second computer, because I knew my first one would have worked.
I can call it. It's on the screen.
Oh, it's up there. He's got it up on the screen.
I gotta do this because it's trying to.
Maybe you should. Y'all should. You hit that red button, this button right here. There you go, it's on screen.
Okay. With me tonight is Christine Miller. She's the owner-operator of a canine hotel resort in Horsham. She's operated that for quite a few years. She'll be running through the overall operation, how it works, and so on and so forth. What I wanted to do tonight, we will have an engineer making a presentation. We'll have a traffic engineer making a presentation.
I'm gonna let Jim run. Jim will switch the slide. This is coming next.
We'll have a traffic engineer make a presentation, discuss traffic, and then we'll have a sound engineer who's done a comprehensive sound study of the area, and then talk about how noise from a canine hotel, how the noise projects and how that affects the surrounding areas. Let me start by going to slide number 2, which generally, and I'll be talking about this a lot tonight, the area in general. Let me see, I can't see my pointer right when we're doing it this way. Is it okay if I go up to the screen and point? Would that be
Sure.
helpful?
As long as you take the mic, I guess, from the other one.
I think it's important that everybody understand exactly where this is located and some of the uniqueness of the site. To orient you, this is the existing KinderCare building and parking lot right here. Across the street, just up a little bit, is the continuing care facility that is over here. This is Highway 295. These are the residents in Fieldstone Lane here. Penn Community Bank is here. And then this is all the Patterson Farm here, behind our site. The area that we chose to put the canine hotel resort is right here in the corner as the road starts to go up. So it's really right here in this corner. Again, pretty much across from the continuing care and quite away from any residence, and certainly quite away also from the kinder care. Could we go to the next slide? I think is that the next slide or is it the same slide, Jim? There we go. Okay. Again, this is a little different perspective, but I think the most important thing we can show here is how heavily wooded the site is. Back in the day, not that long ago, there were greenhouses over here. This is actually the old retention basin for the greenhouses. Again, where we're trying to locate the building is right in this little niche corner here, as far away from kinder care, as far away from everything else, and back by 295 and by the Patterson Farm, which is obviously basically open farmland. Again, the building would be right here, kinder care, continuing care residence. Next slide, please. This is basically the building, what we designed the building for. We tried to keep the building to the spirit of the historical commercial area. This is somewhat representative of a barn. Obviously, we would go to HARP, get all their input, and make any modifications that HARP thought was necessary. But we thought this was a good place to start with that type of building, not a commercial building, something that was more in tune with what was originally designed to be in the commercial historic area. Next slide, please. Again, just to give the perspective, this is the Patterson Farm, all open space, all 216 acres. Kinder care's here. We're way over here. This is all commercial here, where there's actually a veterinarian office right here. And then again, over here is some residential, and actually, I'm sure you're all aware, right across the street from us is, I think it's about 90,000 square feet of residential and commercial, residential on the second floor and a commercial shopping center, which is basically really right in this area right here. So that area will be, is all approved to have that built already by Kim Shirley. Next slide, please. We thought it was important that kinder care be part of this whole process. So we spoke to kinder care, and this is the letter. I'll give you an opportunity to read it. This is kinder care's position as far as how they feel about a canine hotel being, within 300 or 400 feet of them. And speaking with them, they think it's a great idea. They think there's a great harmony between the mother or father dropping off his kids and then dropping off the dog or vice versa. So it's a one-stop shop for that kind of a thing, and I think Christine will talk about that in a little more detail. But again, kinder care feels it's a great idea. Next slide, please. Okay, we've been here about a year ago. And in the last year, we've gone around and around with a lot of different people because everybody wants to call Canine Resort Hotel a kennel. And because there's no other designation, there's nothing else you could call it other than a kennel because that's the only thing that fits within your zoning ordinance. And this is exactly what a kennel looks like. This is the Arby Kennel. It's been there for 75 years. These are all open outdoor dog runs. This is where the dogs go. This is a kennel. We're going to show you a video, and I'm going to show you pictures of what canine is, which is everything this isn't. Next slide, please. Again, I'm not trying to demean this particular kennel, but this is how it's maintained outside. This is not something anybody would be proud to have sitting on the highway where people could see. You got construction stuff, it's here, this is their building. It's been there 75 years. This is a kennel. We're going to show you a canine hotel, which couldn't be any further from this, but this is the definition that's causing us a problem. Next slide, please. Okay. We're going to show you a quick video, which I think will really give you a flavor of what a canine hotel is. I'm on, okay.
It takes time deciding which boarding or daycare facility is best for your pet. Here's what makes Canine Resorts Luxury Pet Hotel second to none. Your dog is safe in the hands of professionally trained and certified dog lovers. Every team member goes through an extensive training program called Canine Resorts University. Once they graduate, they are well versed in how to take the best care of your dog. The canine experience is designed to keep your dog happy. Some other doggy hotels might not have spacious outdoor and indoor areas. We've made it a standard at every Canine Resorts location, so your dog has plenty of room to run around, play, and exercise. We ensure your dog's health in a number of ways. The Canine Clean System is unique to Canine Resorts and includes top-of-the-line HVAC systems, UV air purification, hospital-grade disinfectants, and antimicrobial flooring at every location. All of this state-of-the-art technology provides your dog with a clean, safe, and comfortable environment. There's plenty more to discover. Schedule a tour at one of our locations and discover why loving pet parents turn to Canine Resorts and why the International Pet Boarding and Services Association rated us #1 in the nation. Canine Resorts, 5-star experience, love and fun included.
Okay, I'm going to be turning it over to Christine, who will run through a bunch of slides, and I'll come back in at the end. But I did want to say, over the past 10, 12 years, we've been approached by a number of people that wanted to develop adjacent to the kinder care. The partners and myself have taken the position that it's a heavily treed lot, and we never found a use in all that time that didn't want to cut down all the trees. You know, obviously, the zoning ordinance allows us to basically build, you know, a lot of apartments, office buildings, a shopping center, all those things are permitted uses. We didn't think it was appropriate, and when this use came along, we felt that it offered an opportunity because and when we get into the engineering, he'll show you how we're going to save trees. And we showed you that the last time also, and how we're going to do the stormwater and not have to cut down more trees. And we think this was just a very environmentally sensitive way to develop the site. And that's why we kind of moved forward with this opportunity. So Christine will now have some slides, and she'll speak to the direct operation. As I said, she's been operating one for a number of years.
Good evening. As Ron mentioned, I've owned the Canine Resorts in Horsham for 3 years now.
Get closer.
Closer?
Is it on?
Might be easier to talk to this.
Okay. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. I've owned the Canine Resorts in Horsham for 3 years now. It's been very successful. We pride ourselves on just looking out for the health and happiness of the dogs, and our clients love us as well. So I'm just going to walk you through a little bit of the history of the franchise first. It was founded by two brothers, Steve and Jason Parker, who just loved dogs and started a dog walking business when they were young, and it grew into Canine Resorts. The first resort opened in 2005. There are currently 34 resorts open nationally. There are 170 territories that have been sold in 27 different states. Next slide. As I mentioned, our purpose is to provide a home away from home for dogs, where dogs will love to stay and play, and customers know that their dogs are cared for on a 5-star level. And I think this really is one of the things that makes us unique. I make sure that any staff I hire is a dog lover and truly cares about the dog, brings to management any attention that needs to be given to any dog, and the clients feel comfortable leaving their dogs with us. Next slide, please. We provide a couple different services. The first is our luxury boarding. Next slide, thank you. Our boarding is, we call it all-inclusive. We don't nickel and dime different services. The boarding includes daycare during the day or private play. It also includes a Blue Buffalo prescription food. We try to make it as low stress of an environment as possible, high enjoyment. We don't do grooming because most dogs are fearful of it. We don't want to do anything that causes them stress. We have 3 different levels of accommodations. We have what we refer to as our luxury suite, which is the picture on the right. It's an 8x8 suite with a TV in it that plays Animal Planet or the Dog Channel. We have executive rooms, which are 5x7 rooms. They all have the Kuranda beds you can see in the bottom left corner there. And then we have the more traditional compartments for dogs that are used to sleeping in a crate or a more enclosed area at home. Next slide. Okay, we also offer daycare. So as I mentioned, the dogs that are boarding with us have the option to play in our daycare during the day. We also offer daycare on a daily basis for customers who come in, drop their dogs off for daycare, pick them up at the end of the day. Happy as can be, the dogs are happy to come, and the owners are happy to get them home tired and letting them get a good night's sleep. A lot of benefits to doggy daycare. Dogs are lonely, can't be left at home alone all day. Even if you have someone come in to check on them, they're still alone for a good part of the day if you're working outside of the home. Socialization, learning how to play with other dogs, making friends, and yes, dogs do have specific friends that they get excited to see and hang out with while they're there. And it's kind of a change of scenery, a mini vacation with them. And it also is a good way for them to stay in shape and get their exercise. We get a lot of dogs that need more than just laying around the house. They like to run around and play. For our dog daycare, we have 2, next slide please. We have 2 different daycare rooms. One is about 30 pounds and under. One is approximately 30 pounds and over. Every dog coming into the facility has to be fully vaccinated, and any dog going into daycare has to go through an evaluation process where we start them out by just getting them acclimated to the area. We introduce them to 1 dog at a time in our private play yard. Once they're with 3 or 4 dogs and they aren't showing any signs of stress, aggression, they seem to be comfortable and happy, we take them into the larger group and we monitor them for the rest of the day. The reason, and we like to do our evaluations for 4 to 6 hours to make sure that some dogs that might be nervous at first settle down, some dogs that might be fine at first start to get rambunctious, so we want to see how they do through the whole day. We also, next slide please. We also offer personal playtime, so we don't allow any dogs in the building that are not 100% people-friendly, but there are some dogs who don't enjoy being around other dogs. So for those dogs, we do the personal playtimes where they're in a room for the day, but 6 times per day, one of our staff members will take them to a separate private play yard and play with them, and they can do their business outside. And then we also offer baths. So one of our founding principles is that every dog will go home smelling fresh and clean after playing with their friends. And we only do baths to existing clients. We don't offer baths to the public as a drop-in. Next page, next one, please. Okay. As far as safety and care, as I said, that's one of our primary focuses. We have camera and surveillance services. We can also survey it from our home laptops and phones. Security systems, it will have a sprinkler service, fire alarm service, monthly pest control. We also partner with local vets. If a dog does need veterinary care, we always try to use the dog's normal vet first. If we aren't able to, depending on what the issue is, we have a visiting vet that can come in, and we also partner with local vets that are nearby, and we also with any emergency vets if need be. I mentioned already that we do require dogs to be fully vaccinated to come in. As far as, next slide please, as operations, so we pre-register all of our guests Daycare is 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. during the week, 9 to 5:30 on the weekends. Daycare check-in is less than 30 seconds. The first day when they bring them for evaluation, they fill out some paperwork, we ask some questions about their dogs, it takes a couple minutes. After that, they bring their dog in, we know who their dog is, we take the dog back, the customer leaves. When they come to pick up the dog, 90% of the time, the person at the front desk recognizes the customer by face and is up getting the dog before they're even in the door. But it might take a couple minutes to get the dog's harness on, but it's about, again, a couple minutes that the customer is in the building waiting. Boarding check-in is 9 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., and that is so that we avoid the busy daycare rush, because boarding check-in does take a few more minutes. We want to make sure we have all of the contact information, all of the feeding instructions, et cetera. But that still only takes a few minutes. Saturday and Sunday, as I said, the staff is still there, the normal hours, from about 6 a.m. until 7:30, 8 p.m. But the lobby's open to customers from 9 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. My experience in Horsham, we only get a handful of daycare drop-in customers on weekends. It's mostly the boarding drop-off and pickup. And so there aren't as many dogs in total in the building in the weekend either. Our peak times are holidays and summer. And weekends are, as I said, are busier for boarding, weekdays for daycare. As far as safety, all of our play yards are fully fenced in with fences that are made to be sound dampening. They have what's called canine grass. It's a turf that the liquids drain straight through. Any solid waste is picked up immediately, put in trash cans, and then put in the dumpster when we close at night. Everything's hosed down. The inside and outside of the building are disinfected every day, so we do the rooms, the hallways, the lobby, the daycares, and the outdoor area, the fences, turfs, play equipment, everything is disinfected daily. As far as the last slide just shows what type of vehicles bring the deliveries, it's typically either Amazon, UPS, or FedEx, so we don't have any large trailers coming in. Any questions?
Christine, can you talk about like your peak times and the maximum in dogs that you have, and how often that you might get up to the maximum, and what your average is on a regular basis? What's your experiences with that?
Yeah, I would say our average number of dogs in the building during the week in non-peak is between 60 and 80. During peak times, it can get up just over 100. And peak times being that, Thanksgiving, it doesn't get that busy because we don't have the daycares. Christmas week, the week between Christmas and New Year's, it can be pretty busy. Spring break time, and then in the summer. We're not up over 100 dogs every day in the summer, but there are some weeks, especially around 4th of July and some of the key vacation weeks, where we do have that many dogs. Now, there aren't 100 dogs outside at once, because we have the large daycare, the small daycare, and then we have a certain percentage of dogs that are on private play, and they're in their rooms most of the day. And based on my experience, even the dogs within the daycare, 80% are probably inside at any given time. They go out and they play, they come in and lay down. And then another group goes out and plays, so it's not like there are 80 to 100 dogs outside barking and playing all at once. It's a much smaller amount than that. We also always have staff members with them. So staff goes through a full training process. The staff is with the dogs at all times in daycare. If a dog starts to get rambunctious, and starts to bring the energy level up so that it starts to get noisy, we give that dog a break. If multiple dogs are barking, we pull them inside and close the doors. So we do have the ability to do that. We also keep them inside if it's too warm, too cold, raining, and we just let them out for a few minutes every hour. But we can definitely control the energy level and the noise level within the daycares.
How many employees would this require? It seems like a pretty sophisticated operation, having that many dogs and all the duties that they have to, accomplish.
Yeah, there's about 25 employees in total, not all there at the same time. Generally, there would be 8 to 12, depending on how busy we are at any time. At least a couple up front at the front desk, and then in the back as well. And we have, the employees rotate between each of the 2 daycares and what we call the kennel area, where they do the, feeding, cleaning the rooms, bathing. And we rotate them just so that they're all able to do any of the jobs, but also so that it doesn't get too monotonous for them being in daycare with the dogs all day, and we can make sure that they're staying attentive by keeping them occupied with the different tasks.
I recall from last time you were here, you said about a year ago, we had a conversation about the drive and whether it was double,
Pull your mic up to your mouth, Joe.
whether it was double, where a car can be parked in the, I don't know if it's a roundabout and another car can go past it, and there was a question whether it was wide enough. I kind of recall that conversation. It was about a 5-minute conversation we
I
had.
think when we get to the engineer, we have expanded, made bigger parking places and expanded parking to try to meet some of those concerns. The engineer, I think, will address that question
Okay.
probably more so than Christine or myself.
Okay, all right.
If I can ask a similar question, so your Horsham facility, just for the numbers and the dogs in there, how many parking spaces are at that facility?
15.
Okay. So you're able to handle 100 dogs a day with 15 parking spaces?
Yes.
Christine, you're in a commercial, but you have residents in adjacent. Have you ever had any concerns from residents that are close proximity to your location in Horsham?
No, not any at all.
I was just curious about the, I guess, the smell in the trash. You said it looks like the trash is picked up weekly. Or is there some type of bag, I guess? Because I'm gonna have a dog, and I know just with one dog, the smell from the trash cans being picked up a couple days a week. So
Yeah, we use the biodegradable poop bags, put them in the big green garbage bags. We seal them up and then put them in the dumpster. And there really is, I think maybe if you're standing right over the dumpster, but there is not a smell. And customers comment on it all the time that it does not smell. And because we disinfect so often, and we are on the staff constantly to make sure that they're picking up waste as soon as they see it. So there really isn't a smell.
We have Kevin Tennant, who's a corporate member of Canine Resort Hotels. He's going to give you a little bit of an overview nationally, and maybe even some of the technical questions you might have answered, but how they deal with it nationally. Kevin, you want to go ahead and maybe just talk briefly about how many locations you have, where they are, kind of what kind of neighborhoods they're in general?
Sure. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Christine. Great job describing the operation. My name's Kevin Tennant. I'm Vice President of Franchise Operations at Canine Resorts. We currently have 37 locations open across the country. We just opened our 37th 2 weeks ago in Gallatin, Tennessee, and right outside of Nashville. We operate many different types of locations. We've got some standalone buildings. We have inline retail buildings, similar to what we'd be looking at here at this location. We have locations that are nearby other daycares, especially our flagship. It's 2 doors down from the light bridge. It is adjacent to residential areas. So we have a good variety of locations that are inline retail, standalone, in corporate parks. You know, coming to memory, the 5 operating locations we have in Pennsylvania kind of cover all of those different types of locations. We've got our location in Malvern is right next to it's next to a Chinese food restaurant on one side of us, and the other side is a goldfish swim school. So we certainly have a lot of different neighbors, a lot of different locations, and a lot of different retail establishments that we develop in. As Christine said at the top of the presentation, we currently do have about 170 locations in development in 27 states across the country. And you know, we pride ourselves on the safety and health of the dogs that we have in our facilities. So I'll get a little bit further into the design of the building, if that's okay, and especially touching on the safety and security of the buildings. So we'll start at the outdoor area. Those are surrounded by 8 feet of solid fence that also has sound mitigating qualities. It's called Buff Tech. It's a rotationally molded vinyl fence that absorbs 98% of direct sound waves. So that really helps with the sound within the area. And the reason for the 8-foot fence is dogs can't jump over an 8-foot fence. So it keeps dogs in our yard and keeps people out of our yard for the safety of the dogs. When we look at the interior of the building, we're broken up into multiple zones. So as Christine mentioned about our daycare, we have 2 separate daycare rooms. Those are secured rooms with keypad locks and multiple points of egress that dogs would have to pass to get out of that room. In our boarding areas, again, they're very secure buildings. Every area of the building has a secure door that only staff members can access. And the only exit that we use on a regular basis is the exit in the lobby. So if there's any emergency exits throughout the building, there's a vestibule blocking the external door. So if a dog happened to get away from a pet tech, they would have to get through 2 doors in order to exit the building. And we pride ourselves on the fact that we don't really have dog escapes because of all those safety features that we put into our building. Our operations, Christine did a great job of going over that. One important thing to note is we don't let dogs run throughout the building at any given time of the day. When they're being moved between either the bathing room or a boarding location to a daycare room, they are led with one of our trained staff on a lead. We don't have dogs running through hallways. The only place where dogs are really off leash would be secured in their boarding room overnight or in the daycare rooms in the group play area that is supervised by our pet techs. But moving dogs throughout the building, even outside, to bring dogs to their owners outside in the parking lot, they're always on a lead and always secured in that fashion.
Kevin, just to follow up, your building is basically designed inside to accommodate, 80 to 100, 120 dogs in all kinds of situations.
That is correct, yes. We look at the capacity of every building depending on the square footage of that building. So we look at, we really set our capacities based on the size of the daycare rooms. So we have a calculation that is the industry standard of 18 square foot for a large dog, 12 square feet for a small dog. So based on the design of the building is how we set the occupancy or the capacity for those daycare rooms. And then we also optimize our boarding facility. As Christine spoke to, we have 3 different levels of accommodations. And we want to make sure that we have enough space in the building to drive revenue for our franchise owners. But then again, making it a comfortable and fun environment for dogs. We don't want to have a facility like Ron had mentioned at the beginning where there are indoor-outdoor pens, there are chain link fences, as you can see, where we call ourselves the Ritz-Carlton of pet resorts because you can really see the amenities and the detail that goes into the build out of a canine. We want to make the environment for the dog as fun and exciting for them as possible.
Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, this is on the smaller, a little under average size of your canine unit, this particular at 8,000 square feet?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
That is
You have,
the
you have
average
a
size. Our
number,
largest
this
is
is
our-
below average, I guess. It's not, you have them a lot bigger.
We do. We have locations that are 10, 12, even 15,000 square feet. Our flagship location in Fanwood, the first operating location, is a 15,000 square foot location with a capacity of 250 dogs at peak capacity.
Quick question. The outdoor area, is that exclusively for daylight only, or is there lighting? Do you, like, because, I mean, the wintertime, it gets dark at like, 5 o'clock at night. Are you using that, and how is the
We do
light?
have
what
outdoor
kind-
lighting. Yeah, it's not like parking lot lighting that would illuminate the whole area. It's really downlights that are on the building facade that light the turf yard only during those night times that it gets darker earlier, like
Yeah.
within a week.
Do you have sort of a curfew, for lack of a better word, where outdoors not used anymore and the lights would be turned off?
Yeah, so our operations, our daycare operations run Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Okay.
And roughly between 6:30 and 7 is really when most of the dogs are in for the night. Boarding dogs are in their rooms being taken care of, and the daycare dogs are being picked up. So around that time, between 6:30 and 7, really the outdoor yard isn't being used at all. In our operations, we close to the public at 7 p.m. So there are no dogs left overnight. They don't board overnight. They are only in the yard during the day, the times the daycare is open.
Okay, thanks.
Kevin, I just had a quick question regarding the safety you had mentioned with the vestibules and dogs mostly not escaping all the time. Has any dogs escaped, obviously, with having a daycare next door? Obviously that safety would be a top priority, that dogs wouldn't get loose and.
As far as escaping a building, we had one instance where a dog was able to get out of the lobby into the parking lot. We were able to recover that dog, but we have never had an instance where a dog has infiltrated a yard, gone to any of our neighbors, anything like that. In the 20 years of the history of the company, we have not had any instance of that happening.
I think when the engineer makes his presentation, he'll show how things are fenced in and how barriers are set up to, in case of the 1 in a million, something like that happens.
You've talked about training, so the canine university. How many hours is that training? I mean, how much training is staff going through? Is it instructor-led? Is it just watch a bunch of online videos and click things?
It's a combination of online and pairing them up with a supervisor-level employee. The online is a series of videos and kind of PowerPoint presentations with quizzes at the end of each section. The online it's several hours to get through the online portion. And then in my resort, we pair them up with a supervisor for as long as needed. It's usually about 2 weeks. And before they're really allowed to be on their own, we go through we have a training checklist that one of the managers walks through with them, and they have to show the manager how to do every single thing on the checklist. And then we call it their blue shirt test. Then they get their official Canine Resorts shirts and can be on their own as far as, being able to not have to be the extra person paired up.
And then I can add to that also, all of our franchise owners go through a 2-week training program at our facility, at our corporate office, and at our flagship location in Fanwood. So the first week is really going through classroom-style learning. So it's really getting through our operations manual, 8 chapters of our operations manual, going through resort basics, daycare, health and safety of the dogs, emergency training as well. So that's a week of in classroom training. And then our franchise owners, their management, anybody they bring to our training course for a franchise location goes through, basically acts as an employee in our Fanwood location. And they do all of the things that all of our staff does. So they're answering phones, they're on the computer, running dogs, bathing dogs. It's really giving them a real life tutorial of what it's like to run a canine. And we do supplemental training as well. So we do follow-up webinars. Whenever there's a change in our system, we roll out a new training program through our learning management system that rolled out about 2 years ago. And we do require every single employee from franchise owner down to a pet care tech to be certified through our learning management system. And our corporate office has the ability to observe and making sure that every employee that is interacting with a dog or operating in a canine resort has passed that certification.
Just a question for clarity, and I apologize because I wasn't here at the start of the meeting. So it's Christine, right?
Yes.
And so in addition to owning the Horsham location, you would own and operate this location as well?
Yes,
Okay, so you're just not here representing a local franchise. This is your application?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Well, she lives in the area.
Yeah, I live much closer to here than Horsham. And I would likely also bring over a couple of my management team from Horsham to work at the Yardley location.
We can move on to the engineer, and then you can get into some of your other concerns if we want. Next up is Ryan Whitmore. He's our site engineer. We've done quite a bit of preliminary engineering, site planning, and he can go through each thing we've accomplished so far. We still obviously have a lot to do if we are moving forward as far as stormwater and things like that, but I think we can meet, we certainly can did our best to meet the concerns you had when we were here the last time, and we're hoping that, you know, that we've met all your concerns. So go ahead, Ryan. Why don't you run through the site plan? Can you put the next slide up, Jim?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. If you could bring up the site plan that you're looking at.
You have the site plan there, Jim? Oh, there we go. Okay.
And then if you don't mind to zoom in a click. Perfect. Yeah, so good evening, everybody. My name is Ryan Whitmore. I'm a senior project manager for Landcore Engineering Consultants. So I've been working with Ron and the overall K9 team for quite a while now. And we have been through the due diligence on this property, knowing that there's the various questions that we feel are, we've been slowly but surely answering over the past several months, years. But what we have is the site plan. So together with others from my firm, we prepared this plan, and as you know, we're proposing the canine. Well, it's a multi-use building. So you're going to have the canine space that's going to be on the side that fronts on Stony Hill Road. That's 8,245 square feet in size. And then the adjacent space is going to be for a speculative retail use. Use is yet to be determined. However, retail is a permitted use in the HC zone. But it would be some use that would be complementary to the canine. But it is a multi-use building. Then on the left side of the building, so plan north is kind of facing the upper left corner of the plan. So on the northwest side, the side that faces the Patterson Farm and the interstate, you can see the brown shaded area. That's the outdoor exercise daycare or outdoor exercise play area. It's about 2,250 square feet in size. You can see the thick black line that essentially surrounds that outdoor play area. That's the 8-foot high sound fence that Kevin and Christine had explained. So as you can see, that area, the outdoor area, will be completely enclosed on all 4 sides. So 3 of the 4 will be the sound fence. The 4th will be the building itself. You can see that the building is tucked all the way up on the left side, as Ron had explained in his introduction. The building itself acts as a physical barrier between the outdoor play area, the adjacent daycare. And Ron, I'm not seeing it on this plan, but there will be additional chain link fence that will be proposed that along the subdivision line that will separate the daycare side from the canine side. And it's just gonna, it's just an additional provision that in the event of that 1 in a million chance that a dog does get out, it's just an additional barrier that will stand between the daycare use and the canine development that's proposed. So the subdivision will be another component of the application. And you can see the subdivision line, that dashed line that runs about right down the middle of the property. It's overall 7-acre tract. About 60% of the total area will be devoted to the canine side of the tract. The balance being for the daycare. Each of the lots does comply with the HC area and bulk criteria. As Ron had mentioned, that the kennel use is a bit of a tricky part of the overall zoning analysis and I guess overall interpretation of how this project will be navigated through the entitlement process. Where a kennel, a traditional, by definition, kennel requires a minimum lot area of 5 acres. The canine lot, the subdivided canine lot is about 4 acres. The daycare lot is about 3 acres. Whereas the HC zone requires a minimum lot area of 10,000 square feet. So depending on the interpretation of what the canine is, that will really determine what level of relief we would be having a discussion with the zoning hearing board about. But independent of the 5-acre minimum lot area, both lots that are created as part of the subdivision will be compliant with the area and bulk criteria of the HC zone. So getting into the little more into the layout, access, you can see it's clearly coming off Stony Hill Road. If you pan down just a little bit, you'll see that the driveway itself, it aligns with the senior living driveway directly across Stony Hill Road. The location of the driveway is actually where the existing curb cut is located today for the access to the gravel driveway access to get to the Patterson Farm, the township property. That there was an easement and a gravel driveway that's since been decommissioned, and that easement no longer exists. It's been completely eliminated from the deed. But that existing curb cut is being repurposed, widened to accommodate all the design vehicles that would be anticipated for this. I mean, Christine had mentioned the box trucks, Amazon, FedEx, but then the emergency access, fire apparatus, garbage vehicles. I know that it sounded like there was a question as part of a previous meeting about the cross circulation through the property. So during pickup and drop off, there's 34 parking spaces in the parking lot that are proposed, which when you look at the numbers, Christine and her other location, Horsham, has 15. They need 15 spaces, which that accommodates their use. On this
Again,
plan,
we designed it based on the questions that you guys had the last time. Did we have enough parking? Were they big enough? So we've cut down more trees and expanded everything.
Right. So then there could be more parking. The parking spaces could be larger. However, that would be at the expense of and the detriment of additional impervious coverage and additional tree impacts. So as part of the parking demand analysis, we had looked at what the canine demands are, which there are similar locations require 15. We had proposed 20 on the plan. The retail building, when you look at the ITE projections, they need about 10 spaces. We're proposing 14, which works out to a total parking demand of 34 spaces. I'm sorry, total parking demand of 30 spaces where we're providing 34. So it's our position that we feel that the parking is adequate. We can provide more, but at the detriment to the additional tree impacts. So, and as part of the overall site design, that's really one of the intents, as Ron had mentioned, that, we're trying to minimize the development footprint to minimize the impacts to the trees. The loading operations, the canine, and then the spec retail building are uses that don't demand nor do they warrant a full-time, long-term loading zone. So once again, it's just in an attempt to minimize the impervious coverage and the tree impacts. We're omitting that from the plan, and that would also be a conversation that we would have to have with the zoning hearing board for that. Trash collection, you see it's in the backside of the parking lot. Stormwater management, that's not really in the scope of this discussion for the use, but we had looked at and had performed some stormwater management testing in that green shaded area. It's labeled, tentative stormwater management area. It's proposed in the location of the existing driveway and within the easements. That area is already cleared from the previous driveway, so it's an appropriate location to take advantage of for a stormwater management feature. Once again, that will be subject of any land development discussions later on down the road should the township and the board vote favorably in favor of the application. Really the final component of the plan is signage, where the sign package proposes a freestanding monument sign right out front. It's a 12 square foot monument sign, pretty modest. Then there's going to be additional wall signs that will be mounted above the front doors of each of the different uses. The HC code permits one 12 square foot sign, either a wall or a freestanding sign, not both. So once again, a discussion with the zoning hearing board about that second sign for the canine, which neither sign is out of character with the neighborhood, and it's really identical with what's next door for the kinder care, across the street for the senior living. So it's pretty consistent with what's already existing along the highway corridor. So that's about it for my summary of the overall site plan. So Ron, I guess I'll hand it back over to you. If I didn't address any questions, definitely let me know. I think I did, but happy to answer anything. Should anybody have any?
So Ryan, question about the site plan. There's now a bike path that runs across the front of the property. It fairly recently installed and connected that goes over the bridge over 295. Hasn't been there very long. Happened to go by there this weekend. It was beautiful weather, and there were actually a lot of people walking and biking there. It was a weekend, so I don't know how much in and out traffic there is during the day on a weekend with boarding, but you're going to need to obviously show the bike path on the plan. And I would think if this moves forward, you'd want to have some signage on the bike path that for people know, so that they understand there's a lot of cars going in and out of there, even if they're not in the parking lot for very long periods of time. Next question may not be for you, Ryan. I'm not sure who it's addressed to, but I'm a little confused here because we've got this proposed retail component to the building, and you're coming in here, you're asking basically our position on the zoning relief for the primary use of the building, but you don't know what the secondary piece is other than it would be compatible to the first piece. Do you anticipate that smaller piece, which is 3,400 square feet, is going to need zoning relief as well?
We don't think so. We do not think so. But obviously, at the time that a use came along that we felt was compatible, if it were required, we'd have to come back and ask the board's okay for that.
Okay.
We believe we would be able to not do that, but if we did, we would have to get board's permission and obviously come in front of you and get your permission and then their permission.
Okay, and without knowing the use of that additional space, the number of spots is really kind of, it's throwing darts on a board, isn't it, really, at this point, on that piece of the building?
Well, we're obviously governed by, we're obviously governed by national standards per se. And again, if it's some kind of a unique use that would be high traffic, high parking, it probably would require, permission to come back for the board to review it. But when we kind of reviewed that, we felt that most of the uses we thought would want to go there would be within permitted within the zone.
Okay. Thank you.
I was going to ask a question for my friends at the environmental, the EAC, but I see that you've already noted porous pavement area for the parking spaces. So just to verify that at this point is the intention of the planning is to use porous paving in
Oh,
conjunction.
absolutely, and something else I want to remind you about. Historically,
Ron, you want to grab that mic? Thank you.
I'm sorry. Historically, when the greenhouses were back there, this was a road.
Yeah.
And we've tried to keep everything to that road, and we've also planned to, we believe we can fit, without really getting into the trees, all of our stormwater on the old road that was there. That's been abandoned. It no longer exists legally, it doesn't exist anymore. And we believe we can keep all the stormwater here, which again will protect all the trees everywhere else other than, and this area here is already clear cut. This area up here is kind of trash trees. The only real big trees are back through here. There's a few big trees in through this area, but most of the area we're going to be disturbing. We've really, and when we get to the actual construction, if we have to shift things a little bit one way or another to save trees, that will be our goal.
And it's a fair assumption that if this use is preserved, that top right section of the lot is essentially going to be preserved as trees.
Yes, it'll be, we would.
Because it's therefore inaccessible once you've
From
placed
that
your
one
trash
area,
enclosure.
you could see the trees. We would plan to see all those trees remain untouched.
Yep.
We're not really looking to have to do too much in any of those areas. And again, that's going to come up in site
Yep.
plan review when we do some of the final hard engineering and any overflow piping we have to do. But again,
Yep.
our goal, and one of the reasons it's taken us 10, 12 years is we wanted to come up with something that we could protect as much of the wooded area as possible.
And so the proposed fencing along the subdivision line, which isn't on this draft of the plan, but if that were to be a condition of approval, that fencing be memorialized and maintained, would that be something that you
Oh,
would
yeah,
be willing
absolutely.
to agree to?
Well, we would, my two comments, we would, we plan on keeping the parcel as one ownership. However, the subdivision is not, at this point, cast in stone. It will really be up for the Board of Supervisors to make some decisions on how they want to treat this. We don't mind it being one lot to where we take care of the one lot. If we do a subdivision because somehow it helps everybody get through some of the zoning heartaches, that would occur. But that fence would be there, it would be on the property line, and it would always be there. And the property is already fenced. There's an existing fence right now that runs all the way here,
Right.
around the kinder care play area. So this fence here has been there since, day one. All we're doing is adding the additional fence in this
Yep.
area right here, just extending their fence out to the road.
Right, and what I would be asking for would just be as a condition of whatever exceptions are required here, that we memorialize the fence is required to be maintained. Right?
Absolutely.
We don't want to run into a condition where, 10 years from now, maybe things aren't maintained quite as nice, there's some problems with the fence, and it's less of that safety cordon that it was envisioned as.
I think that's a great suggestion.
Okay. Sorry, I don't want to get into questions that aren't appropriate for this phase, right? So the shape of the parking lot and things like that. I think the only question that I have at this point goes back to, you originally shared a letter from the operator of the kinder care saying they'd be happy to have the the resort as a neighbor. I have to ask, when is their lease up?
Well, we just redid a lease with them a couple years ago. I think there's at least 10-year plus options.
Okay.
It's a very successful kinder care. Daycare seems to be one of the more,
A note to the landowner saying, I'm happy about this use means a lot more when you're required to be there for 10 years than it does when you're negotiating a lease renewal, which is why I ask.
well, yeah, I mean, and they have some options. I think we have 10 years maybe left on this lease, and then there's a couple
Good.
options.
Alleviates my concern. Thank you.
Okay.
Ron, I was just going to say that, I'm sorry, I was just going to say that it's, appreciate your desire to save trees, and I think everybody up here does that. This is more of a comment for the rest of the board. I had a look at the last master plan, which was updated in 2019. None of us up here were on the planning commission at that moment. And it talks about use modifications in the historic zone or in the overlay zone, what was hoped for, what could be there. This is sort of outside of that, and I just think we ought to be cognizant of that. Doesn't mean we're married to the master plan, but it was what the then Planning Commission recommended and the Board of Supervisors approved in 2019, recognizing that some of those supervisors are no longer on the board. But it was just a plan that's approved, and we should be aware of that. It looked like the encouragement was, the intention was to encourage non-residential uses like antique shops, professional offices, cultural facilities, bed and breakfasts, which I guess this could come close for a dog bed and breakfast if you want to. I like the TVs in the large rooms.
Do you serve breakfast to the dogs?
And
Great.
those sorts of things. So it's not consistent with what the stated goals were back in 2019, and I recognize we're almost in 2025, but it's worth pointing that out.
Well, I would suggest that the master plan called for very heavy development on this site. Basically, I think we can develop about 90% of the site. I don't know whether Brian knows that off the top of his head, but it was 80–90% of the site could be blacktop and residential or stores. And we never thought that type of development was appropriate in this area. Even though it's approved across the street, the entire area is paved everywhere across the street from us. We felt one of the reasons it's taken so long is to find a use that made some sense.
And I appreciate that, and as I said earlier, I think everybody up here appreciates the fact that that's what your objective has been.
And I'll say, I think this does meet a need for the residents of the township. And if there is going to be a canine resort placed somewhere in the township, this area is probably the area that has the least impact on surrounding residential and other things.
You took the words right out of my mouth, because when we looked around, there's no place else in the township that we could put this that wouldn't be a lot closer to residents, you know. I mean, there's residents everywhere. But here with the Patterson Farm, the highway, when you hear from our sound engineer, you're going to hear from him that the sound from the road will far exceed any noise that could possibly escape from the Canine Hotel. So it just works. Okay, Ryan will ask Peter to go next.
One,
Oh, I'm
I have
sorry.
a few items before you move off
Okay.
the site plan. Just regarding the building configuration, right now you have it rotated. So really the side of the building is facing the front of the lot. Was there any consideration of rotating the building and having the parking lot along the frontage of the Stony Hill?
Well, there's two issues. One issue is I do believe your zoning wants your building built on the road.
Okay.
That's how they want it built.
We believe the way we designed everything would be the most environmentally sensitive to the area. If we turn it the other way, we'd have to cut down more trees, we'd have to move it back, we'd have all kinds of issues. We just felt that with the existing clear-cut areas, the building, keeping the building on the road, the frontage on the road the way the zoning ordinance wants it, this was the best way to do it.
Then, following that up, further down the street, at 732 Stony Hill Road, their building configuration is similar to yours, but they do have sidewalk and an entrance facing Stony Hill. Would you look at maybe additional sidewalk connectivity, you know, in rotating your configuration to have like a front yard, you know, connection to it? And it could lead to the sidewalk as well as the existing path that's going in.
Well, certainly, we'll look at anything. I think that adding a sidewalk is fine. I think that's a good idea because we do have all those apartments now on the other side of the highway. Those people, I could see those people walking their dogs over.
There's a bike path.
And there's
The
a
bike
bike, you know, the bike
path.
path there and whatever. So I think adding a sidewalk, but I think rotating the building would be problematic in a lot of ways. I would want to resist that just from the disruption it would end up causing to the whole site.
Okay. Then I just have a few items here for the woodland preservation. You're showing 70% of preserving like the 70%. Was there any preliminary engineering for that, as that woodland preservation is right up to the limits at this point with the grading and the clearing? Are you positive that, you know, that could be met through the design process?
I'm not sure I totally understand your question. You know,
And this
and certainly,
may be a question
I'm not here
for
to, I'm
Mr.
not here to
Whitmore.
talk about, I'm not a lawyer, our engineer's not a lawyer. You know, we believe that the way we designed this was the most effective way to design it under the zoning code. Whether or not, you know, if we're allowed to have 80% or 90% impervious surface, you know, now we're clashing with this other ordinance, so I don't know how that really kind of plays out. I'm not sure I'm qualified to even speak to that. But, you know, we'll certainly listen to what you have to say, and we'll.
Okay. Well, what that would be is if you disturbed additional woodlands, you'd have to go back and get another variance, just to let you be aware of that, okay? And then for the trash truck removal, the trash, you have a single area there. What is your operations for trash removal? Does, you know, as we're looking for like off-peak hours, so that your guests could come in and do your drop-offs, what do you do at your other facilities, and what are you planning to do here?
We have trash removal once per week. They come on Monday morning before we open.
Okay. And with the drop-offs, has there been any issues with the guests not parking in the parking lot and just trying to do a curbside drop-off before?
No, the only time we've had that, we had one customer with an infant, and she called ahead and said, could you bring the dog out?
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay.
If I can just add to that for 1 second. Sorry, Ron, just wanted to add to that. We don't allow for a curbside drop-off as part of our operations. We do require, as part of the custody transition, the owner comes to the lobby to drop the dog off. We don't do curbside pickup as an operation.
Okay, yeah. Peter, would you like to touch on, from a traffic perspective, you know, trips, the present entrances there, and what you've been able to determine so far in your review of the project?
Yeah, sure. So, hi, I'm Pete Spizak. I'm with Traffic Planning and Design. The site, you know, everybody's gone through the site. Ryan's gone through the site plan. Talked about the driveway location being, you know, opposite the senior living facilities, driveway across the street, so the driveway's in the correct spot. In addition, along Stony Hill Road there is an existing left turn lane for the proposed driveway. It's already there. I think that was put in, for the previous use. So there is already currently a left turn lane there. It's roughly 65 feet, which would, give you the ability to store basically 2, potentially up to 3 cars. In addition to that, we've done a traffic count, or a trip generation count was done at
Jim,
an
do you have
existing.
There's a chart, Jim. There's a chart? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so there was a trip generation count done at an existing facility in Fanwood, New Jersey, which basically has the exact same number of dogs that is proposed at this facility. And based on those counts, it was counted in the AM and PM peak hours. It basically generates 57 AM trips, total AM trips, and 52 total PM trips. And then in addition to that, we utilize the Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Handbook or Manual to determine the general retail trips for the site, the 3,400 square feet of general retail, and that we're looking at 14 AM peak hour trips and 36 PM peak hour trips. And there you see the totals for 71 total AM peak hour trips and 88 total PM peak hour trips. Based on that, it's not a very high generating use of, as far as traffic is concerned. We don't foresee, the need for a traffic signal or anything like that. Obviously, additional studies will have to be done, considering that this driveway is on a state road and we will be required to get a highway occupancy permit from PennDOT. So PennDOT's going to have to be involved as this project moves forward. In addition, this trip generation is actually very comparable to some of the approved uses that are, in this zoning district. Considering that you could potentially put a medical office building on the site or even a restaurant, those 2 uses generate trips consistent with what is the total generation for this proposed site.
Ryan, can I ask a question about this chart? You have 33 trips, so 57 total trips in the AM, 33 entering and 24 exiting.
Right, you got employees that enter in the morning.
Right, but then in the PM, you have 27 entering and 25 exiting. So there's like 11 cars that disappear. Am I missing something wrong?
Well, look, I mean, the way the count was done, it could have been that somebody showed up at, 5:59 to pick their dog up, and then didn't leave until after that hour was over and conduct, the.
Okay, so this is within your peak hour
Correct.
only. Thank you.
Correct.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a little bit stupid. I thought we had disappearing cars. I'm glad you're not stealing cars.
Never understood these traffic charts.
no.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
They never add up.
Perfect.
Is there any other questions? And we'll move on to what I think is one of our most important issues, or one of the big issues. I'm going to give you a handout. It's also going to be on the screen. This is our sound engineer. Ben? You there, Ben?
Present.
This will be up on the screen. We've done this is just a recap of, there you go, pass them out. This is just a recap of what you're going to see on the slides, but there's a full report that I believe I sent to Jim, and certainly anybody can have the full report, but this hits on all the key issues when it comes to sound and the possibility of any disruption of the neighborhood. Go ahead, Ben.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Ben Muller. I'm one of the principals of Ostergaard Acoustical Associates. Our office is located in Woodbridge, New Jersey. I've been practicing in the field of applied acoustics for 23 years, a little over 23 years now. And my practice is confined only to acoustics and noise control. So we were brought on to explicitly study sound produced by this facility, and our focus, of course, was on dog barking, as we know that that's what makes this application or this use unique. What we do as part of our noise study is a couple fold, right? We want to look at what our code limits are applicable standards that are in place and apply those. And then what we will do is take some form of raw data, which in this case, as you'll see in my presentation, that we acquired from another similar facility. Coincidentally, it was the Fanwood flagship site that we've been discussing tonight. We applied that data as if it were present to the site. And then we look at those data with respect to code limits, but then also we went one step further and did an ambient survey in the area and applied those levels to the ambient to determine what impact there might be and also evaluate the potential auditability. So I have this open on my screen. I'm hoping everyone's looking at the same thing, but we have an overlay here that I've created of a Google Earth image with the site showing over it. And what is helpful to point out here is that my focus is on the outdoor play area, which is on the left side of the screen here. And what we were looking at is what distances those dog barking activities would be from areas of interest. And so on the top of the screen, we see approximately 365 feet to the play yard of the daycare center that's next door. Going to the west across Stony Hill Road, approximately 270 feet to the senior facility. And then lastly, the residential uses that are closest to the site, 385 feet, and that's roughly southwest of the site. And then also just to give a foreshadow, if you will, but those number 1 and 2 that are shown on the screen are where we ended up doing our survey, and we deployed monitors out there for a week period. Location 1 is set back from Stony Hill Road approximately or in the direction of what would be the playground area. And then location 2 is similarly set back on that side of the road to be in line with the senior facility as well as the residences there.
Sorry, is location 2 the 385-foot distance, or is location 2 where it is represented on the map? That's where the acoustic monitoring
Sure,
was.
that is where it is represented. Our locations get selected for a number of reasons, part of which is public access. So there was a nice tree in the middle of an unused parking lot there, which allowed for that to be a better placement than to try to encroach upon an existing residence. But that being said, the main noise in the area is from Stony Hill Road, from local traffic, as well as a little bit from Interstate 295 to the north. So what happens is you'll see that location 2, even though that's not on top of a resident, that's applicable for approximately a 150-foot setback off of Stony Hill Road, which is going to be equivalent across there. So it's the ambient, it's all encompassing, and so we're able to apply it in a much greater spread than just saying that this is only accurate for the specific location that it was obtained. Okay, so next slide of the presentation. Let's just go over briefly what our noise codes are. So in the township, we have the bulk of the discussion on noise within our performance standards, section 200-66. Sound is regulated based on the maximum allowable sound level for continuous noise, continuous being steady in nature. We'll discuss in a second there how dog barking relates to that. But then we apply a different level depending on the receptor. So 65 for industrial receptor, 60 for commercial receptor, and 55 for a residential receptor. Now, those limits are measured at the source property line, which would effectively be on our side of the street. But then the limit to be met is the receiving limit, which for our discussion here is going to be the most stringent of which would be residential receptors, or 55. There's a little bit of an interesting way of doing things. I'm not quite sure how the township enforces or has looked at this ordinance in the past, but I find that juxtaposition a little bit challenging, right? What happens in our geometry here is that not only where our nearest sensitive receptors are, let's say to the west, right across the senior facility and the residences, but not only do we have Stony Hill Road, which is a right-of-way in place, but we also are afforded additional distances, for example, in the senior facility having a parking lot. And so what I'll discuss as we get on in the study here, but we recognize that the intent of the noise code is to protect the public health and safety, and then that is obviously our goal. But we also look at how to interpret this to be applied in a meaningful way. Just to round out the noise code discussion, if noise occurs in the nighttime, those limits are more stringent to account for sleeping hours and increased sensitivity, so they're reduced by 3. But then there's also another adjustment that's able to be done for non-continuous noise, which does apply to our facility, in that sound that occurs for less than 5% of a 1 hour, which is a 3-minute time period, we're allowed a more permissive limit by about 5 dB. And the purpose of that is because if it's not continuous, if it's not 24/7, there is a decrease in sensitivity towards occasional intermittent activities. Lastly, we have another chapter 79, which discusses animals. And here it discusses noise from our facility in a bit more of a subjective manner, but basically prohibiting disturbances of the peace from repeated loud noises, and that animal control would investigate any such nuisances. We don't have any Pennsylvania or Buck County codes that apply to site, so we're taking the Lower Makefield ordinance here and making use of that for our analysis. Next slide. So I kind of touched upon already some of the interesting elements that I find within the code. I believe that in terms of enforcement, I see this language often, right? We talk about property lines, et cetera. Many times the verbiage is that it's at or within the property line, which allows for a greater interpretation of things. But based on my evaluation, while I'm not questioning how these might actually be enforced, what I wanted to do to look at, that made sense, was that we were going to look at how this sound is affecting the nearest receptors. So those distances that we looked at in our first slide, looking at what dog bark levels would be received at those vantage points. We wouldn't look at it, again, along Stony Hill Road, at that common property line. You would be inundated by car noise. If we were to look at it in the parking lot of the senior facility, that's not an area of repose. That's not an area where people would reasonably be having a conversation, et cetera. The house is a little bit of a moot point because there's not really much of a differentiation between where that house boundary would be. But I guess I might ask, just as in a rhetorical fashion for the township, but in looking at our residences that are 385 feet away, reading the letter of the law, it's unclear whether it would still be appropriate to measure our dog noise at our property line if we were considering a receptor that was not adjacent to our property. So in this situation, I want to consume or include all of those receptors because I believe there's still a potential to be impacted even if you're not the adjacent property. So allowing me this liberty, and let me finish my presentation here so we can see that indeed we will have no impact, and we can discuss the nuances of the code language at a future time here. So ultimately, based on my assessment that we would not have dog barking for an extended period of time in excess of 3 minutes, we've heard discussion from the site operator as well as the owner representative, the way the park operates or the facility operates, and that parking is really there's an escort, and it's something that isn't encouraged, and so we don't envision a time of frame where you would have dog barking for an excess of 3 minutes. So I applied the 5 dB adjustment to limits. So my interpretation of the code would be that we would want to show that we don't exceed 60 at residential receptors and 65 at commercial. Just to put in a point of reference, and coincidentally, we'll also see this when we talk about the ambient, but a typical car pass by is going to be in the range of 60 to 65 for vantage points along Stony Hill Road. So with that in mind, we find that these limits are going to be acceptable in order to show that the project will have no negative impact. But I will lay that out in more detail with an analysis. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we had visited the Fanwood facility, and this was quite a while ago for other canine resorts. And although there may be differences between the different applications, site geometries, et cetera, the idea was to acquire data that would be universally used, and we did just that. And so just to recount my experience that I had there, a similar outdoor exercise facility. I was coordinating with staff there to let the dogs out, in which case we were dealing with 30 medium-sized dogs, and they were let out and brought back in without any barking to occur. And this is an important anecdote only because it aligns with not only the narrative that we've been discussing tonight, but also with my experience at these facilities, in that the dogs don't bark in the way that we, recall them from 101 Dalmatians or caricatures of that in television movies. So that being the case, that's not something that I can leave with and then make use of for other applications. So we also then coordinated a separate test where we got a Doberman Pinscher, which is going to be on the larger size of dog, and we measured them 25 feet outside of a vinyl fence. So the dog was approximately 5 feet within the vinyl fence. So that measurement got not only repetitive barking, we were able to get maximum barking, and then also look at it in terms of what's the average maximum bark. For example, you might get 4 or 5 barks in a row. Not all of them are the same strength, but we were looking at that in terms of not only average, but then the pure maximum. And these measurements also take into account any acoustical performance of the vinyl fence. So results of that are, as are shown in our slide here, but the average maximum of 77 dBA was measured, and at the highest ever was 80. So high levels, but close in. And then we'll see that as a greater distance is introduced, that sound is going to fall off with distance. So the table at the bottom of the slide here is going to bring back into play the distances that I pointed out in our aerial. So the KinderCare play area to the east, approximately 365 feet from the exercise area. And just as the crow flies, just using the attenuation provided by distance, we would expect to see a reduction that would result in levels between 54 and 57 from the maximum and the average dog barking. For the senior facility, closest distance, it's 270 feet away, so slightly higher results, 56 to 59. And then the furthest were the Windflower Lane houses down to the south, and those levels will be in the 53 to 56. So you can see that although the distances are quite dynamic, if you will, that once you're substantially far from the site, it's not as much of a factor. The sound is going to fall off faster in close, but then you can see there's not too big of a difference between, for example, 270 feet and then almost 400 feet. So we don't see too much of a change there. So now making our analysis, next slide please, making our analysis a little bit more specific to the site and to make it a little bit more accurate, but we should take consideration the following. One is that the orientation of the building, it shows that to the east and the southeast, that building is going to block all of the line of sight to the KinderCare and the residences. And so we took a conservative reduction of 10 dB off of that. In reality, we would probably expect to experience 15 to 20 or more, depending on the frequencies of the dog. Frequencies meaning the octave content of the dogs, not frequencies in terms of number of iterations. And then the other thing that we've heard tonight is that the proposed enclosure is going to have a BuffTech sound fence. This is a more robust material than what I had measured, which is a normal PVC fence might be 1.5 pounds per square foot. This BuffTech product is 3 pounds per square foot, so twice as dense. The denser the product, the more massive, the better it is at attenuating sound traveling through it. We discussed that it's going to be 8 foot in height. And so by adding those adjustments to our previous analysis, you can see that only reduces things further. Really, to the KinderCare and to the residences, that 10 dB is a substantial decrease in level from what we previously were showing. Levels of 46, 47 maximum to be expected. And then to the senior facility that's directly southwest of the site, there is only just a small improvement. We adjusted it by 3 dB, which brought the maximums of 59 down to 56 for this specific site. So next slide. Now that we have our idea of what our limit is here, we were showing maximum levels of 56. We discussed that the code for residences, considering the senior, and even we can consider the daycare as residents, for that matter, as it was a sensitive receptor. But you can see that we're below 60 for all of those locations. But in order to find out, well, how is this site going to be received? What's the potential for audibility? How is this compared to other intermittent activity in the area? We carried out our survey. It was over a week period, went from February 2nd to February 5th earlier this year. The weather was conducive for the measurement. We want to take a look at winds and precipitation and things like that. And as we also discussed, the location 1 was set near the playground area, and location 2 was on the opposite side of Stony Hill Road, equal to the setback of the senior center and the residences there. So next slide is just bringing us back to the first slide to, I guess, give you another sneak peek of what we're talking about. What we have been talking about for the past minutes of our relationship with different things. So you can see here, I want to highlight that the building does in fact block complete line of sight to the daycare as well as the nearby residences. There might be an area where as you swing further away, there's a slight ability to peek in there, but it's inconsequential. So I still think that there would be some form of additional attenuation, regardless of what that actually might be. That's really semantic, because what we end up really looking at is the senior facility, because those are directly across from the outdoor play area. Okay, so next slide. So this is location 1. So this is the one that is representative of the daycare playground area. It's set back approximately 150 feet from the center line of the roadway. And you see what typical ambient sound data represented. It's extremely dynamic. There's highs and lows and everything in between. What I want to, highlight for your information is to see how the daytime levels, which are roughly, you can see on top of the screen, we started midday on February 2nd, then we have a full day on February 3rd, full day on February 4th, and then part day on Friday, February 5th. And you can see the trend is that during the daytime, around noon, right, we have the highest levels. That's when things are very active. And then things fall down and get quieter and settle down as the nighttime comes upon us. And the lowest levels are generally measured around 2 a.m. That's kind of when streets are least active. But as you can again see, even though we might get lulls that approach 36 or 37 on occasion, that it's only a minute or so before another vehicle passes by. And again, we have levels that are 60 or so during that same nighttime period. So not focusing on the nighttime because we've also heard extensive discussion about that dogs get brought in by 7 o'clock. So we really should focus on 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. because that's when this bark occurrence would occur. And what I have done overlaid on this ambient data are 2 lines. The gray line represents the highest maximum bark, which in our previous slide, we discussed the level was 56. That was to be expected at the senior facility. Now, location 1 is at the playground, but I'm applying this anyway, just to be conservative. And what we see here is that maximum of all time falls well below almost 99% of all the daytime activity that occurs. Are there some instances where there is a drop where our maximum level it can be higher? Yes, that occurs. Primarily, you can see that on Friday a bit, and on Thursday on the 4th. You can see that there are times where those levels are lower, but again, just as soon as that occurs, there's only a limited amount of time before a vehicle passes by that's producing levels of 65 to 75. So what we can conclude from this is that if there was a lull in traffic, dog bark could be audible, but that with respect to everything else that's occurring in the neighborhood currently, that it's diminutive. It's a minimal level if it is audible, and then shortly after that, it's going to be drowned out by a passing vehicle or other activity that's existing in the area. When you start to look at statistics, looking at our orange line, that's at 53 dBA. That's the average maximum bark that we discussed in the previous slide. You can see that blends in further. And so instead of looking at the max, which is the highest level that we measured in the period, you would expect that the dog barking is going to be more likely to be of varied strength, and so therefore it'll be a variable in terms of perception at a receptor's location as well. Next slide. So this is similar. The two monitors were out during the same period, and so you will see overlapping of high levels. What we see here at location 2 was that only about 100 feet away from the center line of Stony Hill, and so we see everything kind of got shifted up a little bit. The maximums are a little bit higher, the minimums don't quite hit the same minimums, and that is just an indicator of that we were closer to the main noise source in the area, which is the roadway. But we're not focusing on the actual specifics of this. This is really more of a high-level, broad brush discussion to characterize what activities are currently occurring within the area, and to then superimpose what a dog barking simulation would be. So levels here were slightly higher, so the closer you are to the road, the less likely you are to hear that dog barking noise, and the more likely that you have ambient noise that contends with and even drowns out that barking sound. Again, pointing out that during the nighttime hours, even though dog barking is not expected there, that, you know, should something like that occur, and again, I'm doing this for discussion purposes only, obviously the narrative of the operation is what has been said, but just to point out that in the instance where if you had a bark at nighttime, I would still have the same conclusion that it would be difficult to discern considering the other amount of activity that occurs in the area. The other thing to point out that barking is primarily going to be one-offs. You won't have that hyperactive cacophony of multiple dogs barking at the same time and rallying themselves up. We heard explicit narrative on that specifically tonight about how the dogs' demeanors with other dogs, and that their excitement levels are of the utmost concern of the staff, and to keep the dogs happy and not have them be overexcited and stressed out for that matter. So I guess if I can use that opportunity to touch upon multiple dogs, we've been using this discussion for a single Doberman Pinscher. What I want to point out that is I think that using that as my basis of design is conservative. A larger dog is going to have a higher level of bark. It's going to be lower frequency. It's going to travel further. So I like that this is a fine example to use from a conservative standpoint. A smaller dog, a Yorkie, for example, is going to have a higher pitched, lower level bark that will not produce levels of the same magnitude. But discussing the fact that there might be multiple dogs running around at the same time. Because dog barks are impulsive in nature, right? They're 1 second in duration. Now, yes, we can have multiple barks in a row, but each one in itself is impulsive in nature. So because they're short in nature and they're kind of periodically intermittent, even if you had more than one dog that was also barking, the chances of those two dogs overlapping their bark at the same exact time such that it created an overlap and an increase in sound level is extremely unlikely. I won't even say rare because it would be less than rare. To give you an example of that, other impulsive sounds that we have familiarity with in our day-to-day would be if you were in a retail parking lot. You know, we might have 100 cars within our eyesight, but you will never find that you will have multiple car doors slam at the same time or multiple cars start at the same time. The potential is certainly there, but it would require a great deal of coordination and chance and luck to have those overlap in that manner. Also, we have heard on behalf of the staff that if there was an instance where one dog's excitement got 2 or 3 dogs excited, that is certainly something that staff would want to tamp down anyway as soon as possible, regardless of the sound effects of it. My last slide here is just a conclusion slide. So just to bring in everything that we've talked about in the last couple minutes here or so, our analysis shows that maximum sound levels at the senior facility would be as high as 56. That is taking into consideration the improved sound fence. It would be below 50 for the playground and the residences, and that's taking into account the building. My next bullet here says not take into account, but that is obviously incorrect, and I want my spoken presentation here to be taken as gospel, but those numbers are with the adjustment of the enhanced fence and the building. So that's a typo there. This is a technical detail here, but the parking data that we had measured are fast response, not slow, and not to bog you down with the technical details of it, but measuring at a fast response is a much quicker sample rate. And so that bark is we're going to get that pure max of that bark because the meter was measuring at a much faster sample rate than it would if it was on slow response. And I point that out though, one, to add a layer of conservatism to the analysis, but two is because the slow response, which is a sample every 1 second, is more how our ear hears. And so it's more how people respond to noise. So just to point out that we have additional levels of safety factored in here. My conclusion is that we meet the performance standards at the location of repose. We can discuss the specific details of how stringently the township enforces the code, but I believe that this meets the intent and is also, as we've shown based on the ambient, not going to result in any negative impact, and nor will it be audible for most occurrences. And then finally, given all the above, this use and the potential for dog barking outside would then not have any negative acoustical impact on the area, and this is a good fit and a good location, and the orientation of the site as well as the upgraded acoustical fence are all efforts in being a good neighbor and ensuring that the site conforms with the surrounding area. Questions?
So to grossly oversimplify all the very intelligent things that you just said to us, is it a fair assumption that in your opinion, the sound of a dog barking from collection point 2 would not be audible over the standard street noise? Is that how I should interpret this chart?
Yes, correct. Now, I don't think any of us can ever say ever, if in the instance of a lull, the dog level could be most prominent and so will be audible. But what we are showing based on the several days of collection of data and the magnitude that we're expecting is that it is a lower level source in the area. And so that means that it's more likely to be blended in with the neighborhood. It's more likely to be difficult to discern. And above all, it makes it not a force to become a nuisance.
This question isn't for you. I think it's more for staff. So I was looking, while the gentleman was speaking, while Ryan was speaking, I was looking at the orientation of the homes on Windflower. So it looks like it's the garages that are facing the proposed site. There are not balconies in the backs of those homes, are there? I'm not familiar with the homes.
No, I don't.
I can check quick, but I don't believe so. But those details kind of become blended in because I just did it as the crow flies to an area where it makes sense. They don't quite have a backyard to speak of, but if there is an upper window, then that would certainly be an area where I would want to focus. And it does look like
I'm anticipating resident concerns. It's a different concern if you have a window that faces there versus a back porch that you love to sit on and watch the sunrise over Patterson Farm in the distance, right? So
I don't see back porches. I do see upper story windows, but then those are probably set back another 40 feet.
Yeah, it looks like it's just a garage. There wouldn't be like a.
Okay.
Yeah, I would also suggest,
there's
like you
garages in the
said,
back,
that the
yeah.
ambient noise from Stony Hill Road is not going to be convenient if you don't want to sit there and, it's going to be drowning out, it's going to drown out the dogs that might bark when the sun's coming up. But that is the back, there are garages back there, and it's, the houses are oriented towards the front.
Yeah. Just an observation from being a dog park visitor, I will say, and the dog experts on the caller here can support this, when you have happy, healthy dogs in a play area together, it's not the yapping and yowling that you'll imagine it is from a poorly run kennel where dogs are neglected. So from personal experience, I wouldn't expect constant noise. But that said, what are your standards for outside time? Is the outside area utilized consistently from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.? Are there, and you had spoken about individual playtime, and I don't see an individual space, so I presume using the outside space. So can we characterize that usage? Yeah, it's just garages.
Sure. Okay. Yes, so typically, if the weather is nice, we leave the doors open to the outside so that the dogs can come and go. When it gets above a certain temperature, above 85, below high 30s, we pull them in and keep the doors closed. We can also, like I said earlier, if the dogs do start to get noisy, we can pull them all inside. We can give timeouts to the dogs that are causing the issue as well. The private play area, yes, it's outside, but it's only one dog at a time. And because they're fenced in with a solid fence, there's nothing to attract their attention to get them starting barking when they're out there by themselves.
So during your daycare operation, the large dog group has free movement among an indoor area and an outdoor area. They can come and go into those areas. So conceivably, you could have several dozen dogs in that play yard at a given time.
Conceivably, but like I said earlier, my experience is 80% of the dogs that are in the daycare group are inside at any given time. And we do have the ability to just pull them all inside and keep the doors closed.
And the doors are closed in the evenings after that 7 p.m. hour?
Yes, everything's
Okay.
closed and locked.
And there's always staff with the dogs,
Yes.
even when
Right.
it's outside. There's always staff there with them. They're not allowed to be out there by themselves.
So in the evening hour, yeah, there's still traffic on 95, but I live not far from here, and it's nice and relatively quiet, and you can hear a dog bark. Is it the opinion of the acoustic engineer that the building would fully attenuate any sound of any overnight boarding dogs?
Absolutely. I mean, while that was not the focus of my presentation tonight, it is a substantially different scenario for interior dog barking, even with the door open per se. But with, fully enclosed, the attenuation afforded by the building facade is going to be a substantial reduction. I don't think you would hear it outside at the property line, let alone across the street at these receptors of interest.
I don't have any other questions from the presentation. Thank you.
Any questions? Okay.
Ben, just one final question. Your presentation was very thorough and very technical, but just, again, for the last time, you don't really see any adverse effect to the residents that they're across the street as far as the way we've designed the site and the way the site is operated? Ben?
That's for me? Yes.
Yeah, Ben, you don't see any real potential adverse effects to the residents?
No, sir, no, and we've covered that multiple times in different ways in my discussion, but I agree. There will be no disturbance or negative effect.
Actually, sorry, Ben, one follow-up question. How many similar facilities have you prepared studies for in the last 5 years?
Well, this type of this business model, if you will, is becoming more and more popular with people having dogs that rival how they take care of their kids. So we've probably worked on about this maybe the 5th one that we've looked at.
Okay.
And in working with canines specifically, we have about 3, and we work with them also on any existing issues, and there haven't been any to speak of. So there's a good track record, and we're comfortable that how we're looking at this is a conservative but realistic way of how it'll be perceived in the future.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we appreciate the time you gave us tonight. I guess what we would ask for, Jim, at this point is some sort of a recommendation to the as to your findings, how you feel about it, so we would be able to take that on to the supervisors and make our presentation to them and see how they feel about this?
To that end, could you remind me the proposed subdivision that we're looking at right now? Would the acreage of the canine side was approximately, was it 3.2 acres, 3.1 acres? Does anyone recall?
4.2, 4.3.
Oh,
I think.
4.1, okay.
Again, that's if we end up doing
Yep.
the subdivision.
Yep.
It's it's about 7.5 acres for the whole site.
Yeah, I did a little bit of looking as well. The Lower Makefield Dog Park, right? Which I think is a pretty close comparison, is a little over a 3 acre, is it? 3.71 acres. Okay.
Just before we move forward, I have a question for the township engineer. There was a letter in the packet that said the applicant doesn't believe any portion of the property is classified as regulated wetland or watercourse. Do you agree with that assessment?
We did look at the letter. We haven't fully investigated it yet. During the submission of the land development application, we'll look further and confirm those findings from their consultant.
Okay, thank you. So, does someone want to make a motion about a recommendation, one way or the other at this point?
The only, I'm not going to call it a sticking point, but I guess the open item on this that I have a hard time voting on. Oh, I'm sorry. The only item I have, I guess I'm not even sure how to vote on, is this whole retail piece. You know, we don't know what parking is required. We don't know what's required. We just know that there's a portion of the building they're proposing they want to split off and have essentially a separate business in, right?
I think the question before us is the conditional use on the canine resort portion.
Okay, that's the
Is
question.
that accurate? I think.
Okay.
That is
That's,
accurate.
okay, perfect. All right, then I don't need to worry about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think the testimony was that if it does require further zoning approval,
Okay.
they'll be back before you and/or zoning.
Got it. All right. Then I have no other questions.
Anybody else? Okay, so seeing that there aren't any, somebody want to make a motion about a recommendation?
So I think I'll make the motion that, actually, let me ask the question. So we're going to recommend to zoning whether or not to approve, what's the
We're making a
recommendation is to the
recommendation to
board?
Board of Supervisors.
To approve or not approve the conditional use?
Separate and apart from zoning, there are zoning variances that we believe will be required, so that will be
Okay.
part 2 of this. Yeah, so this is just a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors, whether or not you
Okay.
recommend approval of the conditional use.
So then does the commission, if we were to recommend the board support the conditional use, I think the only condition that we'd look for is to memorialize any subdivision line, have and maintain a fence. I didn't hear anything else as a condition of conditional use, did I?
I don't think so.
No?
No, and I just want to mention, the application originally was presented as really an alternate, either subdivision or no subdivision. And I think that was the testimony this evening as well, that they
Yeah.
would rely on really the desires of the Board of Supervisors, whether or not they would like to have.
So
this
not to say a
property-
subdivision line, simply to say that a fence be maintained between this facility and the childcare facility.
Regardless of the fact that there's a
Regardless.
subdivision or not. That's correct. You
Perfect.
could do that.
I think that's
Okay.
perfect recommendation.
Yep.
So I will move that the Planning Commission recommend the Board of Supervisors approve the conditional use, so long as it is memorialized and agreed to that a fence in good working order shall be constructed and maintained between this proposed facility and the existing childcare facility.
I'll second that.
Okay, there's a second. Now, is there any public comment? It looks like there's none. So we'll call a question.
Can I just make one last little comment? I kind of went up and looked real quick, the code like that you referred to, it doesn't really refer to this in the master plan. I think it seems pretty relevant now to what's out there, and I'm not sure we've necessarily followed what was in there in the other businesses and stuff that are out there right now 100% anyway. And I think given what's there now and what we have in the area, I think it's kind of, that, in my opinion, it's not inappropriate.
So Adrian and I discovered that skate shops are not a contemplated use, but a tinsmith is.
Yeah, a tinsmith is.
So, anyways.
However, forestry is a permitted use.
Yeah. So anyway, I did look that up because that was, and it's not permitted, it's not listed as a conditional use, but it's not specified out, but I think it's definitely in this sort of same vein as what we have there.
Actually, what I was referring to was in the master plan, was not in the ordinances, and in the master plan,
I looked
the
up the
section
ordinance.
of what was recommended for, in the future, to be contemplated as possible exceptions. That's where I was looking.
Oh,
That's where-
I went up to look the ordinance up.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
Yeah,
but again, that was
okay.
almost 7 years ago
Yeah.
when that was put together.
So, and anyway, I don't think it, with what reality is today, I don't think it's, even in what's on the current papers now, I don't think it's wildly out of bounds with anything that we're doing in reality, so. That's my opinion.
Okay. We'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
And it passes 5-0 as a recommendation.
Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank
Put
you.
together a good presentation for us. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So there are no other items on our agenda this evening other than to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And we are adjourned.